Hi, we're Sma and Rainy. We're reaching, close to the end of our introduction to tea series. Sad. But we'll be talking about black tea this time. Black tea is the most oxidized tea out of all the 6 major tea types. And a quick note, it's also known as red tea in China. We're going to continue calling it black tea for the purposes of consistency for this video, but just FYI, it's also known or referred to as red tea, mostly in China. Black tea is one of the most consumed tea types in the world, and like green tea, it's produced everywhere. Everywhere. I recently found this out, but even Japan produces black tea, which I think usually when you think of black tea, you either think of India, Sri Lanka, or China as a major producer, but even Japan produces black tea. Anyways, but yeah, black tea is also drunk in some of the most versatile ways. So it can either be drunk straight as a black tea, or some other regions will brew it with spices, add milk or sugar to it, or they'll flavor it with an oil like bergamot oil, such as Earl Grey, or they'll make blends. Black tea is also one of the most popularly used teas to make blends.
Yeah, that's a really good sum up. And just FYI, the reason that black tea is called black tea in English is because of its very dark, leaf appearance, versus Chinese calls it red tea is because when you brew the black tea, the leaf color appears to be darkish red or like reddish brown. So that's basically the reason. And what makes black tea special is that it's the most oxidized tea. It's just, unlike green tea, is oxidized all the way. And its production process is pretty simple and straightforward, not like oolong tea complicated. So first of all, as usual, in spring or autumn, the farmers will pluck the tea leaves. Then they will wither the leaves either indoor or outdoor. After that, they will roll the leaves into different shapes depending on the cultivar. Then what happens next is probably the most important step for black tea, which is oxidation. And what the step means is that farmers will allow the polyphenols in tea leaves to react with oxygen in the air as much as possible, and during which process the tea leaves will become, will produce that reddish, like dark reddish color, like I mentioned before. And then this process usually takes about 5 to 6 hours. And the reason that the step is really crucial is because it ultimately decides the fragrance and the flavor of the black tea. Then after the leaves turn red, the colors change, the farmer will roast the teas. Usually for a lot of the commercially mass-produced black teas, this process is done by machines. However, you can still find some small, like independent farms, like for example in China, that do traditional roasting, that farmers will use like pine trees, to smoke up the teas. For example, like the lapsang xiaochong, or in Chinese, which is zhengshan xiaozhong. Oops, sorry about that. The camera just died on us. So let's pick up from the lapsang xiaochong. As I was saying, lapsang xiaochong is the first black tea in the world, and it's from China. And when it comes to roasting lapsang xiaochong, traditionally speaking, farmers will use pine trees to smoke up the teas, and that's why this tea is special, because of its the smoky flavor. And lastly, you just dry the teas like what you do with all other teas. And there you go, then you're done.
So black tea was first discovered in Fujian, China, also in the 17th century. And you know, like with most tea types, at this point I think you guys might be catching on that it seems like most of the major tea types were discovered on accident. So the accidental discovery story of black tea goes as such. There was once an army of soldiers that were passing through Fujian, China, right as a farmer had plucked some tea leaves.
Yeah.
And so I guess he felt rushed. And he like withered them and then dried them a few hours later or something like that. And I guess in order to save the harvest, he decided that he was going to roast them with pine wood. And that was the founding of Lapsang Souchong. And it turned out that the soldiers were like, man, this is some really good tea. And so it accidental, and he was like, phew. And then Lapsang Souchong became a thing and formally known as the first black tea discovered. And then at some point it made its way over to India. This is honestly really largely in part due to colonialization. Awful colonialization, but we won't touch on that deeply.
Not today.
Not today. But basically, the British took some tea plants from China and introduced it in Darjeeling, India. And around the same time, they discovered that there was a Camellia sinensis varietal that was growing in Assam, India, that the locals would drink and was much richer in its black tea taste. And that's how you have the main black teas that are grown in India.
So there's so many different types of black teas around the world. However, unfortunately, there is no worldwide standardized classification for all of them. Okay. But for this video, we are going to touch on two major countries in the world that produce, well, actually three of them that produce black teas, and just kind of quickly show you how each country categorize their black teas. And as usual, let's go to China first. Well, Sima kind of like talked about this earlier. You know, Lapsang Souchong is from, you know, Fujian province, as the very first black tea in the world. So in China, black tea is kind of categorized by the region that they're from. When you say Lapsang Souchong, people automatically know where it's from, and they have sort of like expectation of it. So first it's categorized by region, then it's by the grade, because, you know, under a tea type there are also subgrades. Then we also have Kimun, which is another really famous black tea from China, from Anhui province, and it's also famous worldwide. So Kimun, Darjeeling, and Assam are, well, categorized as more like classified as three of the top black teas in the world. So Assam and Darjeeling are both from India. They are from northern India. Assam is from Assam region versus Darjeeling is from the Darjeeling region. And so it's kind of similar to, you know, like Chinese black teas. They're both named after the region. Then in India, they kind of classify them as, like, for example, BOP, which is broken orange pekoe. So they look at the tea's leaves, dry leaves appearance, and then they taste the tea and then categorize, you know, grade their teas, categorize their tea types. Versus in Sri Lanka, which is the last country that we're going to mention, the most famous tea is Ceylon. Ceylon. Ceylon? Yeah, Ceylon. Sorry about that. So Ceylon is considered one of the finest teas in the world. Yeah. If you are curious about them, we definitely encourage you to look more into, you know, the classification of black tea, because it's actually quite complicated. But since we're doing only intro series, so that's why we're trying to simplify it.
Yeah, fair warning, when we say it's quite complicated, it is pretty complicated. To be completely honest, I don't entirely understand the grading system for Indian teas.
Right, like the BOP, BF, be, sometimes the letters can go very long, you know, like 6, 7 of them.
Yeah, lots of acronyms. But if you're curious, there's a lot better information out there on the internet than our confusion around it.
Oh, let us know how you do.
Yeah, and if you want to educate us, let us
Please.
know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or maybe make a video about it.
Yeah. When brewing black tea, you can actually use boiling water. So typically you can use anywhere between 205 Fahrenheit to 212, which is just a little below boiling point to boiling point. And this is because black tea is the most oxidized tea, and so the tea leaves can handle the high heat. Having said that, we do recommend that, especially if you're brewing Gongfu style, to brew a little below boiling point. And if they're Chinese black teas, sorry, they can be a slight bit more delicate, and also when you do brew at boiling point, you're more likely to bring out the astringency in the tea. And
basically, Chinese teas are just difficult.
Yeah. No, but I mean, even Indian and Sri Lankan teas, like, you want to brew a little bit below boiling point, just because it'll bring up more of the depth of the flavor, as opposed to the astringency. Here's a comparison of Assam black tea, which is from India, and a ruby black tea, which is from Taiwan, and a comparison of Assam black tea from India and a Jingju Mei from China.
There is a wide range of flavor profiles when it comes to black tea because, well, it's produced in many different regions and countries in the world. However, in general, black teas have a sort of maltiness, caramelly, and honey-like sweetness tasting profile. Specifically speaking, Chinese black teas are more likely to be a little fruity, you know, of dry figs and dragon eye fruits, and sometimes it can be floral as well, versus black teas from India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka are more likely to have a sort of nuttiness and leathery, and also muscatel type of flavor in there.
Benefits of black tea are that due to the longer brewing time of black tea, you are going to get bigger caffeine kick. They help with digestion, so they help with your gut health. And they give you warm, cozy feelings on a cold, wintry day.
So that was a quick look into the world of black tea, and join us again in 2 weeks that we're going to talk about pu'er tea. So in 2 weeks, pu'er tea is going to be the last episode of our tea intro series. So please bear with us. That will be the very last information dumping episode, and after that we'll go into something a lot more fun, which we will let you know next week. Yeah. In the meantime,
Commit and like.
Yes.
And happy steeping.
Happy steeping!